And not all of my stories are Jewish, but this one's a Jewish story. And there was this fellow, let's call him Yitzhak. And Yitzhak lived in a poor shtetl. That means he had no money. The people around him had no money. It was a hard, hard life. He had no family. And it was just tough for him to get by from day to day. And he couldn't hold down a job, and he didn't have what it took to beg. So he thought, well, I'll go off and I'll rob people, and I'll get some money that way. Well, he was about the most incompetent thief you could ever hope to have. So he would try and rob somebody, and they would fight him off, and they would beat him up. And he kept trying and trying and trying, but he just couldn't get a hang of it. And so he sat and he thought about it, and he said, well, the problem is I'm only one person, and it's one-on-one. I'll get a band with me, and we'll go off together, and we'll beat people up together, and that way we'll get money. And so he got 3 or 4 other guys who were equally incompetent, and they would go off and try and rob people, and the whole group of them would get beaten up. I mean, it was just a miserable failure. In fact, they got to be so well known as the incompetent thieves that whenever they were walking down the street, people would race over to them and beat them up. So it was really terrible. Well, Yitzhak is thinking about it, and he says, the problem here is, first of all, everybody knows us. Second of all, nobody's got any money here anyway. But if we want to find money, where do we go? We go to the highways, what they call it, between the villages. And there'll be these carriages going up and down the highway, and there'll be rich people in them, and we'll rob the carriages. And there's where the money is. So they went off and they hid by the side of the road, and this, wonderful carriage comes by, and, they never stopped to think that a carriage with a wealthy occupant would have guards. And so they leapt out to attack this carriage, and they almost were all killed. I mean, it was miserable. They managed to crawl away alive, but not much more. And the rest of the men were fed up and said, this is just not worth it. But Yitzhak said, wait a minute, I noticed that up and down this highway, there are also these wagons that go back and forth. And in the back of the wagon will be a rabbi. And following the wagon will be a bunch of his disciples. And whenever they get to a village, the people come out, and they're so happy to have a rabbi come that they'll give him food and clothes and sometimes a place. And all he has to do is to answer a few questions or maybe make a blessing, and that's all it takes. He said, I could do that. I'll be the rabbi. You be my disciples, and we'll make it happen. And one of the fellows says, but Yitzhak, you don't know any answers. You don't know any blessings. How's that going to work? And Yitzhak says, that's why you're a failure. If they knew the answers, they wouldn't be asking me. I can make anything up and they'll believe it. So they said, okay, give it a try. They found an old wagon and this poor mule, and they found him a cloak to wear, and they made it to the next town. And sure enough, just like he said, people came out, and they didn't even ask any questions. They started throwing food at him and offering him all sorts of stuff. And the mayor came out. The mayor came out and said, I haven't seen you here before. You must be a well-traveled rabbi. Would you do me the honor of coming and staying with me? We'll put you up. We'll give you separate bedrooms. You can have a bath. We'll feed you tonight. And all I'll ask is that you make a blessing. Yitzhak says, sure. And they head off to his mansion, and the guys are like, you did it. This worked. And they get showed up to their rooms, and they can smell the food being cooked down below. They're taking the first baths they probably had in their life. It's wonderful. They come down for dinner, and the mayor has invited everybody there. It's a big ballroom, and they're sitting at the head table. He's sitting next to the mayor, and they're drinking. Everything is wonderful. Until finally the mayor kind of nudges Yitzhak and says, Rabbi, would you bless my daughter now? And Yitzhak says, sure, bring her down. I'll give her a blessing. And the mayor says, well, she's not well enough to come downstairs. And Yitzhak says, she's not well enough? He says, no, no, no. In fact, Rabbi, she's likely to die tonight if she doesn't get the right blessing. So please come up and give her a blessing. Well, Yitzhak's heart is going like this. And they walk up these stairs, and he's followed by his men. And they get to the top of the stairs, and there's this door. And they open the door, and it's just a tiny little room with one candle burning in this bed, and this 10-year-old girl laying on the bed, and she's not well. The mayor takes Yitzhak and he pushes him in the room and he closes the door. And everything goes quiet. And a little while later, people start to hear some weeping. They can't quite make out who it is, but it gets a little louder and they realize it's Yitzhak. And his weeping turns to crying, turns to wailing, and everybody is sure she's died. And sure enough, the door is flung open. He comes racing out, tears streaming down his face. He runs down the stairs and out the door. And right behind him walks the little girl. She's cured. She leaps into her father's arms. It's wonderful. The men are totally confused. They go running down outside, and there's Yitzhak just prone beneath a tree, wailing and weeping. And they say, Yitzhak, Yitzhak, where did you learn to make a prayer like that? He said, prayer? I don't know any prayers. Well, you must have done something. She's cured. And he said, I didn't make any prayers. All I did was I said, what kind of a God are you that you would put the life of a little girl into the hands of a thief?
Nice.